Okay, so we're going to start the Cold War unit today, but before we go into that, let's do a little refresher. You guys took the test last week about World War II, but let's make sure you know exactly how it ended. So on the back of that notes, just match up the country to the correct outcome of World War II. And there's 6 countries and 6 possible outcomes. I'll give you guys about like a minute. You guys should know this because you just got a test of it. Remember key events or key terms that we talked about. Give you guys about 30 more seconds. When you're done, just put your pencils down, put your pens down, and look up. Let's start going over this. Okay, number 1. What happened to USA after World War II, or the end of World War II? Aaron.
I put D, fought the Nazis across Western Europe, helped bring down Berlin, and also won the war in the Pacific.
And you're correct. Okay, number 2, Mike. What happened to Japan?
I put B. Had suicide bombs dropped on them.
You were smart. Good job, Mike. 3, Great Britain. Mallory.
I said F.
You said F.
Successfully
job.
defended their island.
Number 4, Germany. Terry.
E. Their country and government was defeated, their leader committed suicide, and their land was in the hands of multiple countries.
Good job, Terry. Number 5, Italy. Caitlin.
I put A, switch sides after they overthrew their leader.
Good job. And last one, process of elimination. Joe? Or you were looking, sorry.
C.
C? Yeah, okay. Good job. Now, 2 things I want you guys to look at is USSR went across Eastern Europe, okay? USA came in through Western Europe, okay? 2 key things I want you guys to remember. And now if we just do it, do you remember a time when you and a friend/sibling were in a bad argument? What happened? Did you try to prevent a physical fight, or did you end up fighting? So I'll give you guys again about 2 minutes. Think about this example and explain in 3 to 4 sentences. If you guys want to do bullets, you're more than welcome to do bullets. Just not going to be picky. When you're done, same thing, just put your pen down.
My answers. Folders and stuff.
Okay, Terry, what's your example?
I have a big sister, and there's one time when we were little, we got into a really bad argument, and I think she like hit me or something, and then she ran away to her room, and I chased after her because I was so angry with her, and she shut her door and locked her door so I couldn't get in, and I was so mad that I kicked a hole in her door trying to get out of her.
Oh.
Alright.
So that's not a really good outcome. That's a good example of the thing.
We did not try to prevent a physical fight at all.
Mallory.
I say that I always try to prevent physical fighting.
Basically, I got a brother that's like 3 years younger than me, and every time that we would get into a fight, it would get really physical, really bad. So my mom always tried to prevent it because the outcome was always really severe and not good. And this is what the Cold War was about. Basically, throughout the next couple lessons, you're going to be learning about how two superpowers they didn't have a physical fight, and they tried to prevent ways so they didn't get into that, because they knew the outcome of a physical fight would be terrible. So just like a physical fight with your brother, or sister, or friend. Okay. Big question. How did rebuilding of Europe and Japan increase tensions during the Cold War? And the SWABAT identify how U.S. rebuilt Japan, recognize key events that played a part in the rebuilding of Europe, and understand how the rebuilding of Europe led to increased tensions between the U.S. and USSR, thus the start of the Cold War. Aaron, what is a war? Just describe it in 1 or 2 sentences.
A normal war is a fight between at least 2 different groups of people that.
That's perfect. Okay, a fight between 2 different groups of people. Sorry to cut you off. I didn't want you to wander on with that. Caitlin, what is a hot war? I know you.
Hot war?
Different description, I know, but what do you think would be?
I think it's like, thank you, Aaron. I think it would be like if it's fought on your own planet. Like, I mean, I don't know. I think
Think in terms of like physical. Do you think a hot war would be a lot of physical stuff?
Yes, I think
Do
so.
you think so?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's like actually.
Yeah, there's like actual fighting on
People are.
with your people on your property or whatever.
Okay.
That's what I think of it.
And Joe, what is a Cold War?
A war where there's not really any fighting, there's just a lot of rhetoric.
Okay. So those 2 adjectives, hot and cold, really talked about in terms of the physical fighting or actual fighting. And that's the main difference between those 2. We talk about the Cold War era. So I just want you guys to keep your minds rolling with that. Okay. First, let's talk about rebuilding Japan. Again, Mike, what happened to Japan after World War II, or at the end of World War II?
They had 2 nuclear bombs dropped on them.
Yep. This is a picture of, I think, Hiroshima. You see the damage. Pretty severe. Now, in your notes, if you look at your notes, you guys are used to your notes because you've been doing this all semester long, but just fill in the blanks or fill in the dots. Not every part of the information is going to be written down, but just the key parts. Okay, so as Mike said, Japan was bombed. 2 atomic bombs were dropped on Japan, and it caused mass destruction of the infrastructure. And as you can tell by the picture, severe. Not just a little bit, but 2 of the major cities were wiped out. And then at the end of the war, they were the losers, so they surrendered. This picture is on a U.S. ship. These people are the Japanese that's surrendering to the Americans. There's a lot of cool pictures if you go online. I found it pretty interesting. Now the citizens were tired, they were embarrassed. Japanese are usually a society of high honor. This brought a lot of shame onto their culture and on the people. So that's the mindset that was going on before the rebuilding process. And the Japanese occupation lasted from 1945 to 1952, and it's when the U.S. came in and helped rebuild Japan, physically and also politically and also economically. They helped rebuild factories. A lot of their factories were wiped out during the war. They helped rebuild them. So some examples of that is coal, steel, and electricity. So when all these factories were built up and they were finally working again, there was a need for workers, which is actually perfect because a lot of the adults, especially male adults, were soldiers during World War II. Now they need a job. So the job became workers. So everything actually fit pretty well in terms of that. We helped build the factories, there were a need for workers, they had the people to do it. What the U.S. did when they came in was they changed a lot of Japan politically. Japan had one of the largest armies in the 1930s, 1940s. But when they came in the USA, they disarmed the army. What does disarm mean? Or disarm, Aaron?
They had to give up like tanks and bombs and weapons and stuff like that, and kind of disintegrate their army.
Now, is there a standing army today in Japan?
No, the U.S. has an army protectorate there.
In the Constitution of Japan, they can't have a standing army. So it was one of the provisions that happened after the war.
Aren't they trying to change that?
They are trying to change that due to North Korea and China, but it still has not been changed. The U.S. is still a democracy. During the war, they had a dictatorship. You guys know about Tojo, so you guys learned about that. Now they have a democracy. The U.S. is all about spreading democracy, so this is pretty big for the U.S. and also the Japanese people. Liberalization. Mallory, if you had to guess what I mean by this, and also looking at the image, what do you think's going on?
That people are selling, or the large landowners have to sell their parts of the land to other people so that everyone has this land.
You're exactly right. In Japanese culture, there was a high class or a big upper class that controlled a lot of the land. So what U.S. did and what the new Japanese government did was they set a quota of how much land you could own. And all the access land or the extra land went to the public, so it went to the people. The people that were farming the land, because usually how structure's set up, is how a rich person and the poor people farm that land. The first people that had the opportunity to buy this land were the poor farmers who've been farming this over time. But this is a pretty big deal. So again, just like democracy, people had a vote, and now a lot of people got a chance to own land, which is a pretty big deal. First time in history in Japan, they had unions. They protected the workers. So in those factories that were built, all those soldiers that came home and got a job working in the factories, they were protected then. There were unions. And lastly, there's education reform. Before the U.S. came in, Japanese education was highly centralized. So basically, they completely changed that. They mirrored the U.S. system. So you guys know what it's like to go through the U.S. system of education. That's exactly how the Japanese did it. And actually, a fun fact was, after the U.S. left, they got rid of this and went back to the old ones. But I just wanted to highlight that point. Basically, the U.S. added a lot of stuff of their own to the Japanese culture. So again, it was mainly the U.S. that came into Japan, and the big outcome of this, and it still is today, we have a really good relationship with Japan. We trade, as Aaron pointed out, there are still soldiers there, which is really important to us. Now in the Cold War, this was extremely important because it was a strategic spot in Asia and also the Soviet Union. Japan is extremely close to the Soviet Union, and also what we're going to learn about is certain countries around Asia became communist. And we fought a war in there, which we're going to learn about a couple lessons. I don't want to give you anything away. But it's really important that we had good relationships and we had troops in Japan. So Terry, do you understand how Japan was rebuilt?
I think a little bit, yeah.
Okay, can I get a hands for understanding? 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Okay, so you guys know it. Sweet. Now let's move on to the more interesting part, at least my favorite part. Let's rebuild Europe, or how Europe was rebuilt. Just like Japan, Europe was wiped out after the war. Look at this city right now. Buildings are destroyed. Imagine living in this place. And this is what a lot of Europe looked like. So how could it be rebuilt?
You know what city that is?
I do not. I think it's a city in Germany. I know I should have put a little thing below it. But I thought it was a really cool picture and it kind of highlighted the point. Before we talk about how exactly Europe was rebuilt, let's talk about the political scene of Europe. Terry, if you look at this map, especially the major map, what's your guess about what's going on?
It looks like there's a divide amongst the allies of territory, like that from where they came through World War II. So like Russia came from the east, and the rest of the Allies, Great Britain and the U.S. came from the west.
You're exactly right. So this area, which is red, which is usually associated with communism, was now controlled by USSR. The gray colors were free, and that's Western Europe. So this set a divide. We're going to talk about a special word for that divide, but it split up East and Western Europe. And this is Berlin. Berlin's a really special city. And you can see that Berlin is actually in Eastern Europe, which is controlled by USSR. But because of how highly influential it was split up 4 ways. So part of it was controlled by the Soviet Union, part by America, part by Britain, and also, it's not on this map, but also France for a time controlled a little bit too. Okay, one way, oh, my fault, Eastern Bloc. That red part that the USSR controlled was called the Eastern Bloc, and it proved to be really important for the Soviet Union. We're going to talk about command economy and communism, communists, next couple lessons, but basically what I want you guys to know is these countries were like a replica of the Soviet Union politically and economically.